Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So today I got a fun and random episode for you guys this evening as we're doing a follow-up video to my initial PixelFX Morph 4K review, talking about what's going to be coming up in Q3 on the analog side of things, and talking about the massive price drop that the Morph 4K just went under. Because last time we talked about this, I said it was a super competent 4K scaler with HDMI in that needed a couple firmware updates to really get that deinterlacing under check, but otherwise I was very impressed with the overall product. The firmware has been updated. A lot of the things that I had a little bit of an issue with moving forward in the beginning are completely fixed up, and now with those analog boards shipping in Q3 of this year and the PixelFX dropping in price, this thing is looking more and more appealing every single time I take a look at it. And I just recently did that morph with the Framemeister video where I kind of used it as the last step in a scalar chain. I was highly impressed with what I was able to pull off as well. But the Morph 4K, basically as it currently exists, is an HDMI and 4K scaler. So you can take whatever HDMI signal you want, put it in the back, and it'll finish the scale to 4K. For something like MiSTer FPGA and Direct Video Mode, that is awesome. We do the same thing on the RetroTink 4K side of things. And now there's been some new announcements that's going to really change a lot of people's opinions and equations on whether or not the Morph 4K might be for them. Because as far as I'm concerned, at the $400 price point, it is a very good scaler. Definitely does need some analog in the back, but that's coming soon. But you will see here now, as of today, if you want to pick up a Morph 4K, they have dropped the price down to $275, and apparently that's because of a large reduction in the BOM or bill of materials. That's just basically the components that make up the actual device, how much it costs them to manufacture one, and how much they sell it to you for with the baked-in profit margin. And before anyone goes down in the comments below and says that's still too much profit, people don't do these things for charity, so please stop leaving comments that things are too expensive. It just means that you don't really want to spend that money. That's totally fair, but the maker should and can bring in that profit margin, so make sure they eat tonight. So around the back currently it still just has that HDMI in and HDMI out, as well as the power port and USB port that really doesn't do much right now. What they've announced is in Q3 these analog boards are shipping, and from what I have heard on Twitter but haven't verified yet, is that there might be some sort of price break for the buyers that paid $400 when they initially purchased their Morph 4K, kind of bringing the price point in line as to what it would have been had they got it at $275, which I think is a very nice touch from the makers of this, understanding that people may want to actually get in on that deal. The early adopters shouldn't really be quote-unquote paying more if you are going to lower it that quickly. And this definitely is more appealing math when it comes to something like the Morph 4K. And with all the different analog bridges they have planned, SCART, component, RGB, stuff like VGA in, that's going to be really interesting. But currently you still can use this thing as a pass-through device if you want to use sort of any analog source into it. I did the video on the Framemeister, I'll leave a link below. I may do one on the OSSC as well soon, so you can get an idea of how that works. And it was highly impressive, even with the Framemeister, which is the oldest legacy scaler we basically have that people still use. I was impressed with what it did. I was able to capture everything, including some of my esoteric arcade boards, and everything worked perfectly fine doing it that way. So that was a really nice benefit of having these devices, because you may have them around. But something like Dreamcast, obviously, you know, whether you go composite, whether you go VGA, right now the Morph 4K doesn't have that, but they're going to be here in Q3. And say they cost $100, that would bring your total up to something like $375. So rerunning this review and talking about the improvements in the firmware and the price differential between the $400 and $275 is a huge difference, and makes it so much easier to say this is definitely a device that would be great on your gaming setup. And you're taking a look here right now at just some Framemeister 2 PixelFX footage, and that worked out really well for me. I wasn't sure how the latency would be, but honestly these two things put together, I had absolutely no problem playing any of the games I wanted. I did Sega Saturn captures, everything worked super well. I was able to play the games like I normally would, and everything looked absolutely spectacular to my eyes. I just used the Framemeister as a simple scaler, did no effects on it whatsoever, and then let the Morph 4K take it all the way up to a 4K capture, doing the rest. And that for me I thought was a very good use case scenario. because you may have something like a Framemeister or an OSSC or even a RetroTink 5X sitting on your shelf right now, and you might want to go to 4K, and you might not want to spend the money on something like the RetroTink. And don't get me wrong, the RetroTink is an outstanding product. I use it 50% of the time for channel captures, and in my spare time I use both the Morph 4K as well as the RetroTink 4K on two different 4K televisions. I know that's weird, I know I don't need to have these two things set up, but I figured why not be able to play MiSTer in both rooms. And of course you get all of the nice Morph 4K quality of life features, including that online update and setup, so you can basically just upgrade the firmware over your phone using it as a controller, and then once you do that you can do it right from the Morph 4K menu, not having to really move around any files on cards. I really have liked that about it. And if they're going to get close to what the RetroTink 4K is doing at the $375 to $400 mark, that is a large difference between the two asking prices. Now before you go down below and think that I'm trying to recommend one over the other, I review products and I generally don't review them against each other on the price format. If you buy a RetroTink 4K, you're going to be extremely happy with it. I purchased it with my own money and I am extremely happy with it. You can also do a Morph 4K, save $300 and change, and be very happy with it as well. And with MiSTer in Direct Video Mode, I'm going to have a much longer video coming out soon about this, a heads up, but I just wanted to use some footage to explain it. When you're using MiSTer FPGA and you just want to get up to a 4K signal, the RetroTink 4K does an outstanding job of this, as does the Morph 4K. When you see this video, you'll be able to test each source side by side to see which one you like better and to see if you can find many differences in each. But at the $275 mark, you can take MiSTer FPGA up to 4K today on your television, and it looks absolutely incredible. And the best part is that's a lot down to just how the MiSTer Direct Video 1 mode works and how good the MiSTer implementation is as well. Or something like Nintendo 64, a 3D platform that has a lot blurrier of textures. First, we're going to go through RetroTink 4K in Direct Video 1 mode, and then we're going to go right over to Morph 4K. And again, if there's any distinguishable difference here, you would have to pixel peep the whole thing to try and find it. As Banner just kind of hangs out there, you get a sense of the textures. So for the $275 mark today, you're going to be able to do something like this. And I totally understand if all you want to do is get MiSTer FPGA to 4K without using your television, the RetroTink price is definitely prohibitively expensive. For me, with all of the analog inputs, all of my arcade boards, it totally makes sense, and I use it all of the time. So it's one of those things, you guys get to pick which one you think would work for you, but honestly, being down at $275 makes the Morph 4K seem super attractive. Even if they charged $125 for an analog board, you're just up to the original price of $400, and you're getting 4K scaling across all analog devices and across all digital devices with HDMI in. And again, a game I've loved so much, Match Melee, RetroTink 4K versus Morph 4K side by side. Leave me a comment down below and tell me which one you like better, or if you can even tell a difference, because I would be curious. Now, obviously, at this point in time, the analog bridges are not out yet, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. Now, I want to test each and every input in a video so I can kind of show you guys what each board does and how it functions with the Morph 4K. So expect that once these boards are ready to ship, hopefully I can run some preview videos before you guys make your decisions, because analog video is super important to me. But even on something like the Framemeister to the Morph 4K, just testing to see if I could continue to maintain sync on a Midway Zeus board, Invasion the Abductors here, I was able to do just that. It worked perfectly fine, and Midway boards can be so ultra sensitive to their sync rate. There's some of the biggest pains out there as far as arcade hardware is concerned, and I had no issues with it really whatsoever. And that to me is at least a testament of how good the Morph 4K ingested the final signal, because honestly, arcade boards are very important to me, and they are very tricky to deal with as well. And on the filter and scaler side, there's been a lot of updates with new firmwares as well, so if you haven't updated your Morph 4K in a while, now is the time, because a lot of new features and improvements have definitely come over. But honestly, when I first talked about the Morph 4K, I said it was an extremely competent scaler for $400 that needed a couple software updates, but otherwise was very good. Now it is a $275 4K scaler with an analog bridge coming soon, so if all you need to do is get to a 4K scale from HDMI, you can do that for $275 now. When those analog boards come out, even with shipping, if you hit $400, it's going to be a hell of a deal. Sure that if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, but we're done. Bye-bye.